To be speaking to you now through the BBC has a very special meaning for me. It means that once again I'm officially a free person. When I was officially unfree, that is to say, when I was under house arrest, it was the BBC that spoke to me. I listened. But that listening also gave me a kind of freedom, the freedom of reaching out to other minds. Of course, it was not the same as a personal exchange, but it was a form of human contact. The freedom to make contact with other human beings with whom you may wish to share your thoughts, your hopes, your laughter, and at times even your anger and indignation is a right that should never be violated. Even though I cannot be with you in person today, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to exercise my right to human contact by sharing with you my thoughts on what freedom means to me and to others across the world who are still in the sad state of what I would call unfreedom. The first autobiography I ever read was, providentially or prophetically, or perhaps both, 7 Years Solitary, by a Hungarian woman who had been in the wrong faction during the Communist Party purges of the early 1950s. At 13 years old, I was fascinated by the determination and ingenuity with which one woman alone was able to keep her mind sharp and her spirit unbroken through the years when her only human contact was with men whose everyday preoccupation was to try to break her. It is one of the most basic needs that those who decide to go into and persevere in the business of dissent have to be prepared to live without. In fact, living without is a huge part of the existence of dissidents. What kind of people deliberately choose to walk the path of deprivation? Max Weber identifies the three qualities of decisive importance for politicians as passion, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of proportion. The first, passion, he interprets as the passionate dedication to a cause. Such a passion is of crucial importance for those who engage in the most dangerous kind of politics, the politics of dissent. Such a passion has to be at the core of each and every person who makes the decision, declared or undeclared, to live in a world apart from the rest of their fellow citizens, a precarious world with its own unwritten rules and regulations, the world of dissidents. There are no external signs by which the strange denizens of this world can be recognized. Come any weekday to the headquarters of the NLD, a modest place with the ramshackle, rough-hewn air of a shelter intended for hardy folk. More than once it has been described as the NLD cowshed. Since this remark is usually made with a sympathetic and often admiring smile, we do not take offense. After all, didn't one of the most influential movements in the world begin in a cowshed? In our shabby, overcrowded office, you will find very ordinary-looking people. That elderly man with poetically unstylish hair is a veteran journalist. He is also a dissident supreme, and when he was released after 20 years in prison, immediately set about writing a book about his harrowing experiences, entitled, Is This a Human Hell? He always wears a prison blue shirt to keep alive the awareness that there are still thousands of prisoners of conscience in Burma. This neat, bespectacled woman with a face free from lines of worry or despair is a doctor who spent 9 years in prison. Since her release 3 years ago, she has been busily involved in the social and humanitarian projects of our party. There are some sweet old ladies in their 80s. They have been coming regularly to our office since 1997. That was one of our tsunami years, when a big wave of repression swept away large members of our democracy activists into jail. At one of our party meetings, I called on the wives and small children and old parents of those who had been taken away to rally to our cause, to show the junta that we will not be defeated, that those of us who remained free would take up the standard of those whose freedom had been curtailed. The sweet old ladies were among the brave who picked up the standard. They are still holding on to it with great tenacity. You will also see in our NLD office women and men whom the Burmese would say were of we can choose the kind of government we want, or simply and sweepingly, we will be able to do what we want to do. This may all sound naive, perhaps dangerously naive, but such statements reflect the sense of freedom as something concrete that has to be gained through practical work, not just as a concept to be captured through philosophical argument.